Friend of the show, Rania Khalek of Breakthrough News, went on Piers Morgan's show. They had a big Israel debate. As you can see here, there were 4 people involved in the debate. And man, it got heated and it went off the railski. So here, let's watch and we'll break it down as we go. This is spicy, bro. This is a spicy one right here.
Okay, Rania Khalek, you've been at some of the protest encampments that we've been seeing in America, obviously in recent weeks. But what do you think of the situation now, which feels like whatever happens, we're heading to the end game here with this war on Hamas? Israel say, we're going to finish the job. We're going to take out every last remaining Hamas terrorist. But of course, many people have a deep concern that if they do this in Rafah, which is a massive refugee camp at the moment, then many thousands of civilians more are going to get killed.
Well, Piers, you're right about that. I mean, this is 7 months of genocide we've been witnessing that continues to unfold. And what's happening right now is Israel has destroyed most of Gaza. They forced 1.3 million people into Rafah, where they told them to shelter. It's supposed to be a safe zone, but they've been bombing it and killing people there anyway. And if we look at what else they've done to the rest of Gaza, they've completely blown up entire apartment blocks. They've dismantled every single hospital in Gaza, including at 2 of them, El Shifa and Al Nasser Hospital, where they summarily executed hundreds of people, including doctors and patients, and threw them into mass graves. They've destroyed every university in Gaza. 600,000 of the 1.3 million Palestinians sheltering in Rafah right now are children, who, by the way, every single day are dealing with starvation because Israel has put them under a complete siege. It's completely outrageous that 7 months into this, we are still even having a debate about whether this is okay to be doing. This is a genocide being carried out against a defenseless population. And if Israel's allowed to continue into Rafah, we're going to see a bigger bloodbath than we already have.
My favorite part of watching that is looking at these 2 plastic bitches, like shaking their head at different times, like, no. What part of that was wrong? That, everything she said there was just factual. Was like, here are the numbers, and here's what's happening, and here's this report about this massacre, and that report about that massacre, and they're sitting there like, what are you shaking your head at? What are you shaking your head at? Those things are objectively true. All right, let's keep going.
On the question of genocide, what Israel say and what their supporters say, and what I'm sure Emily would say, is if Israel was genuinely perpetrating genocide, it has the tools to kill every single person in Gaza.
That argument is so incredible. I didn't kill literally 100% of them, so I guess it's all forgiven? I mean, we talked about this the other day. Dave Smith brought this up. Srebrenica is considered a genocide, and there were 6,000 people who were killed there. We're at over 40,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza. And by the way, the genocidal intent has never been more clear than it is right now, with all the top Israeli government officials basically saying, we love genocide, we'd like to do genocide, we'd like to do ethnic cleansing, we'd like to resettle Gaza, we'd like to force these people out of there. Women and children we treat the same as Hamas because we feel like they're guilty enough, just like Hamas. They could have overthrew them if they wanted to. They didn't. They're guilty, etc., etc. We're doing a siege. We're going to starve all of them. What are we really debating here, man? Holy shit.
If you want to talk about genocidal intent, Hamas has made it crystal clear that they do want the elimination of Israel. And in fact, after October the 7th, the official spokesman came out and said, we want to do it again and again and again. So there is clear genocidal intent from Hamas, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm sure with their fucking slingshots, they'll be able to handle that, right? I'm sure with their amazing rock-throwing abilities, they'll overthrow the government of Israel, which is backed by the world superpower.
Well, Piers, I have a list here of all of the genocidal statements by high-level Israeli officials that the South Africans did a very good job of presenting a case about at the ICJ.
Yeah, but they didn't actually conclude. But hang on. They didn't actually conclude it was genocide yet.
Yeah, yet. The case is still ongoing. You can't use that as, it's not genocide. They said it's plausible it may be, and the case is continuing. That's as big of a win for the side that says this is a genocide as you could possibly get at this point in the proceedings.
It's not actually about that. It's whether you believe that Hamas has genocidal intent, which they began on October the 7th in that horrendous manner, and which they have repeatedly said they wish to continue. Do you accept that is genocidal intent?
I just don't accept the premise. Israel is a settler colony that is committed to stealing as much land as possible with as few Palestinians on it as possible. Israeli leaders have always said that.
I don't want to push on it.
Carrying out right now. Well,
I'm not going to ask you again. I just wonder. You have mentioned. Hang on.
I just want to finish.
I understand, but you were the one that mentioned genocide repeatedly. So I'm just simply asking whether you think that Hamas, with its behaviour and with its stated, you do not think they are genocidal towards Israel.
No, but am I allowed to actually answer? Or are you going to stop me from answering?
Well, you just answered. You said no.
What you're saying is essentially saying, well, Well, am I allowed to like say any more? I just get to say no and that's it. Because what you're talking about here is a group of colonized people. Well, these are a group of colonized people who are fighting against a settler colonial entity that seeks to eliminate them. I'm not going to sit here and call Hamas genocidal, just like I wouldn't call a slave revolt in the U.S. against plantation owners genocidal, just like I wouldn't call Algerians fighting their French colonizers genocidal.
I hear you. Before I go to Annika, though, just one final question for you.
Ironic.
Okay, so would you? This is a question I've asked many people for many months. Would you then condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th or not?
I don't condemn Palestinian armed resistance groups, just like I wouldn't condemn slaves shooting at their plantation masters. Apparently, a lot of you would. I wouldn't condemn Nat Turner's rebellion. I wouldn't condemn Geronimo. I wouldn't condemn the Irish fighting the British.
I just want to add one more thing that's really important. I find it incredibly hypocritical to hear Rania talk about settler colonialism when, in fact, she herself is Lebanese, and the only entity that's acting as a colonialist entity in the Middle East is the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has essentially colonized Lebanon and completely destroyed it, that is colonizing Hamas in the Gaza Strip. It's a proxy of the Islamic Republic. They are the ones calling the shot over what goes on in the Gaza Strip and how Hamas rules over the Palestinian people. If that's not colonialism and imperialism, then I don't know what is.
Okay. Jesus Christ. All right, let me butt in here. That's the part where it goes off the rails. So what's the proper answer to the question that Piers asked? Do you think Hamas has genocidal intent? There are times they've absolutely expressed genocidal intent. There's no doubt about that. But there's also times that they've said, hey, man, we'll take the 1967 borders and call it a day, and we don't have a problem with Jews. We have a problem with the Zionists. So they've said both things at different times, okay? But what's the proper answer to that question? The proper answer is, do you condemn the Hamas attacks against innocent civilians? 100% yes. Any attack on an innocent civilian is evil and wrong and terrorism by definition. I don't care what side does it. The tactic and the strategy of going after innocent civilians is wrong. And that's a war crime, and they should be charged for that to the highest extent of the law, of course. But here's the politically incorrect part to say, but I think this is also very, very obvious. Is it legitimate to go after the military targets in Israel? Is it legitimate to go after the illegal Israeli settlers who are violating international law and stealing more land on a daily basis? The answer is yes. And if you say no to that, what you're saying is Palestinians don't have a right to defend themselves. And that's total fucking bullshit. So the real answer is 100% any attacks against innocent Israeli civilians, unacceptable. If you're going after women and children and men who are not in the military and they work at a fucking bakery or a store or whatever, 100% condemnable in every single instance. In every instance. But if you're going after military targets, that is completely legitimate. That's completely legitimate because that's just Palestinians having a right to defend themselves from what Rania correctly points out is a settler colonial project. And we all know, by the way, also, let's get down to the raw numbers of this. The fact of the matter is, Israel has killed more Palestinians, both as a percentage and as a raw number, and more Palestinian civilians as a percentage and as a raw number. So I'm willing to go with you there to say Hamas has genocidal intent and they've killed innocent Israeli civilians, and that's unacceptable, and I'm fine calling that terrorism. But by the same token, you have to, if you're being intellectually honest, turn around and say the IDF is also a terrorist organization, and in fact, they're a terrorist organization that has done way worse as both a raw number and a percentage. Because I think you can say the intent is similar when the Israeli position is, we want to resettle Gaza, we want to do an ethnic cleansing, we want to do a genocide, we've been carpet bombing kids on a regular basis, we've been starving everybody in Gaza. You both have the genocidal intent and the genocidal action on the part of the Israelis. And like I said, it's a higher number of innocent civilians killed as both a raw number and a percentage. And that's the part that Piers never really grapples with, right? And this is what he does. He trips up guests with this question where he's like, do you condemn Hamas? And the real way to handle that is the way that Crystal handled that. Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Next question. Like, that's an easy part. You should easily be able to do that. But the same thing that leads me to condemn Hamas for killing innocent Israeli civilians is the same thing that makes me even more outraged at the IDF for killing even more Palestinian civilians. And by the way, just so we're clear, I don't buy the argument. Some people make the argument there is no such thing as an innocent Israeli. That's just fundamentally not true. It's just not true. If you're a baby, if you're a toddler, if you're a 12-year-old, if you're a woman, if you're a man who just works at a store and the store is not in, the occupied territories, you work at a store in Tel Aviv or some shit, like, come on, that's an innocent person, right? And so, I don't know, man, this went off the rails. I like how She's trying to throw it all back in their face and flip it all back in their face. Like, anything you say against me, you're guilty of 40 times worse. I like that. But also, I think the easiest answer to all these questions is always condemn the killing of civilians 100%. But also, it's totally fair game for Palestinians to go after military targets and illegal settlers, because that's just Palestinians having a right to defend themselves. And everybody acknowledges Israel has a right to defend themselves, but nobody says that about Palestinians.
I'll answer that in just a moment. I just want to point out that I'm not at all surprised by anything Emily said, because she herself is a settler. So of course she feels entitled to pontificate about a region that I actually am indigenous to. But to get back to the issue of the hostages, my outlet Breakthrough News actually did a review of all of the various ceasefire deals that Hamas put forward and was willing to agree to. There was 10 since October 7th. In fact, in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, Hamas was willing to release the hostages in exchange for Palestinian hostages, who we never hear about, by the way. There are 10,000 Palestinians being held by the Israelis. Many of them are children, by the way. I'd love to see you have one of their parents on your show. But all that said, Israel is the one that has refused any of these deals.
You mean the children
in fact,
who
the
are
only
recruited by
hostages who have
Hamas?
been killed. Let me finish,
15 to
Emily. I let you
17-year-olds who
repeat
are
all of
used as
your
child
imperialist
soldiers?
talking points.
Don't speak
All right,
over each
can I
other.
finish
They're not
talking?
hostages.
No, let
The people who
Rania
are in
finish.
prison are not
Emily, let
hostages.
Rania finish.
Because you don't
Sure.
see Palestinians as human, so of course you can't see any of them as innocent or hostages.
Absolutely false.
But I actually do see them as human. So let me finish what I'm saying here about the hostages.
Just not Jews. You just
Israel
don't see
is
Jews
who
as
you need
human,
to talk
right?
about Israel is who you need to talk to about why they have not agreed to any of these deals, because they prefer to carry out and continue their genocide in Gaza, to steal more land and get revenge, because it is a society that is consumed by hate at the moment. And I don't need to tell you that. You can just go look at the TikTok videos being put up by Israeli soldiers celebrating their criminality in Gaza every single day.
I mean, it's just factually true to point out that the main stumbling block here in the negotiations is that Hamas is saying we need an actual end to the war. And Israel's saying, no, maybe we'll give you a 2-week break, maybe we'll give you a 4-week break, but you give up all the hostages and then we go right back to doing a total genocide and ethnic cleansing. And that's the stumbling block. And that's reported in the West as like Hamas is rejecting the deals. That's nonsense. It's Israel rejecting the idea of this ever stopping.
Just to be clear, you don't think that Hamas are filled with hate for Jewish people or Israel, and you don't think they celebrated
I
the
think
hang on,
Piers,
and you don't think they
go ahead.
celebrated proudly by broadcasting a lot of it to the world what they did to those innocent people on October the 7th. You don't see that that's the same
Piers,
thing.
I think Palestinians don't need to be like high on hate, because they've been occupied and slaughtered for 76 years. And any people, not just Palestinians, would respond to that angrily and would fight for their survival, including all the colonized people in the world who've ever had to fight for their survival.
Okay.
There's
all right.
historical parallels
You
here.
answered
I've
the
already
question.
made them. And Palestinians, and just like any human beings in the
Okay.
world, are always going to fight for their
Hold
survival.
fire.
What I know right now is that the top priority should be to end the genocide in Gaza. There is a genocide taking place. 13,000 children, more than 13,000, have been killed. There's now something called wounded child.
Again, I can't. When these women shake their heads, like, what are you shaking your head at? These are that's a number, and it's actually a low ball. So what are you shaking your head at? What's the issue here? You just don't like the fact that this is happening? You seem like you act like you do like the fact that this is happening, or you're denying that it's happening. Of course it's happening. It's been verified 1,000 ways to Sunday.
Surviving family in Gaza, because of how many children are wounded with no surviving family. This has been a horror show in Gaza. Babies are being starved. Are we not watching the same videos? Are you all not seeing the mutilated children with amputated limbs crying without their parents?
But out of interest,
because of this
okay, but
ongoing
Rania,
slaughter?
I am horrified by those things, but I'm really curious why you cannot express any horror for what Hamas did, given it was the same, if not worse.
It definitely wasn't worse, because like I said, as a raw number and as a percentage, Israel has killed way more civilians.
Because I think
I
it's a
don't understand why
distraction.
you would expect
Because I think
anybody. Hang on, let me ask you a question. Why would you expect anybody to express sympathy or empathy for what you're describing, given your utter refusal to express any for what Israelis went through on October the 7th? Explain.
You guys are using October 7th to justify a genocide. What are Palestinians justifying?
I'm not using it to
doing after
justify
over
anything.
34,000 people have been slaughtered.
I'm not justifying
You're sitting here saying,
anything.
me condemning. Hold on, Piers, you're saying you want me to condemn Hamas in order for you all to feel empathy for over 13,000
No, that's not what I
Palestinian
said.
children who have been slaughtered?
That's not what I said.
It's essentially what I'm hearing here.
No, you're not.
You're
You're not
not
listening.
going to
Well, then listen harder.
I'm not going to sit here.
Listen more carefully.
I'm not going to sit here and condemn colonized people. I'm just not. It's
Right.
not going to happen. You can sit here and try to twist your words.
But you
Look, here's the thing. She brought up the slave revolt example earlier. If there was a slave revolt, and in the slave revolt, you don't just go after the master. You go after the 5-year-old kids of the master. 4-year-old kids of the master, right? I think everybody can look at that and say, yeah, too far, unacceptable. Look, I don't want people to fall into this trap. Because it's not really a trap. It's easy to navigate it. The answer is, do you condemn Hamas for October 7th? Absolutely. All the innocent civilians who were killed, those are war crimes. That's terrorism. There should be justice and there should be war crimes charges over that. 100%. But all of the attacks against the military and the illegal Israeli settlers are 100% legitimate because Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. So I don't know why this isn't that hard. So that's the answer. And if you can't say that first part, then it's easy for Piers and others to look at you and say, well, you're just a shitty person because you don't condemn it when Israeli civilians get killed, right? And again, the only counter to that I've heard is like, I just don't think there are any Israeli civilians. And if you believe that, I just fundamentally 100% disagree with you. So I don't know, but this is not, it's like, this is the gotcha game he tried to play with Crystal. And Crystal was easily able to jujitsu out of it because it's like, you're not going to play gotcha on something where there's a very direct and straightforward and clear answer. Do you condemn Hamas for killing civilians on October 7th? Yes. Next question. But what I don't do is condemn Palestinians for killing the Israeli military, who are engaged in this vicious genocidal campaign against them. Ethnic cleansing, starving of them. That 100% is self-defense. If that doesn't fall under the category of self-defense, then fucking nothing is self-defense.
To weaponize your condemnation.
You keep talking about Israel, okay, but you keep talking about Israel killing babies and children and so on, and that is indisputably happening. And yet you are completely incapable of condemning Hamas for doing the same thing.
Hamas carried out a military operation on October 7th.
Israel
killed a lot of its own people, which you will never talk about. Is it what Israel's doing in Gaza terrorism? Would you call that terrorism?
It's a response to an act of terrorism.
There's Piers. So biased. Oh my God, so biased. It was a response to an act of terrorism. By that logic, you could say October was a response to an act of genocide and ethnic cleansing and occupation and taking away all rights and sovereignty and independence and freedom and justice and liberty. You can't do that. Look, we can't play this game of like, oh, you did this and then this happened and then I did that. And then you can't do that. You have to function in a world of rules and laws and principles and justice. And that means there are certain lines nobody can cross. And you're wrong if you cross it, full stop. And this is Piers' bias showing, right? It's just, he can't help but think of Israel as a legitimate country with a legitimate military, and they're just doing counterterrorism when they do fucking brazen terrorism. No, you should condemn that just as hard, if not harder, than when Hamas kills innocent civilians, because Israel is killing even more innocent civilians. Oh my God. On purpose. On purpose.
Hang on. There are many serious legitimate concerns about the scale of that response. I agree. And they will be held to account by international courts about whether they've committed war crimes.
Oh, will they?
But my issue is you don't give a damn what Hamas did to those innocent Israelis on October the 7th.
And you don't give a damn about what's happening to the innocent Palestinians because the way you frame every question, as Mehdi Hassan pointed out to Piers Morgan's face, you ask me to condemn Hamas when I come on. You never ask somebody who's pro-Israel to immediately condemn the IDF and call them terrorists when they come on. So this is your bias now, Piers. Jesus Christ.
At the heart of your position.
100 journalism professors at elite universities across the country are asking the New York Times to review their investigative reporting on October 7th. A lot of what we heard are lies. You don't talk about that on the show. Israeli media has reported on a lot of those lies too.
Yeah, that's true. The 40 beheaded babies hoax was a hoax. Baby in an oven hoax was a hoax. All the reporting about the, systemic rape totally fell apart under minimal scrutiny. And you have outlets running away from that now at 1,000 miles an hour. So she's right that a lot of this stuff was overstated and was used as propaganda towards genocidal ends. She's right about that. But at the same time, it's also true. Let's not pretend like there weren't any civilians who were killed. There were plenty of civilians who were killed, right? Now, again, as a raw number and a percentage, Hamas killed more military targets than the IDF. That's a fact. That's a fact. But let's not pretend like there were no war crimes or atrocities or attacks on civilians. Okay.
If you're going to say what Israel's doing is a response to October 7th, then could October 7th perhaps have been a response to what Israel's been doing to Palestinians, which nobody was covering on October 4th or October 5th?
That's the point he can't grapple with. Because again, his bias is Israel is an enlightened Western nation, so they're a legitimate nation state, and when they do they do something in response, it's always in response by definition, and it's always like counterterrorism, and it can never just be terrorism. And he's just wrong.
What I hear here is no empathy for people undergoing a genocide. And I'm sitting here and you're asking me to condemn people who are fighting for their survival.
Actually, I'm just asking you. I'm actually just asking you to condemn an act of grotesque terrorism, and you're incapable of doing it.
I want to hear Emily and you and everybody on this panel condemn
Israel's and you're incapable of showing a shred of empathy
terror
for anyone killed on the other side. That's my point.
But Piers, you are fundamentally incapable of talking about what's happening in clear and concise and logical and direct terms, like calling what's happening a genocide. Like saying Israel wants to do a genocide, they want to do an ethnic cleansing. That's why they're starving 2.3 million people. That's why they're bombing schools and hospitals and UN buildings and factories and homes and everything under the sun. And they literally come out and say these genocidal things, but you don't talk about that in the context of what it is, black and white. You don't. You obfuscate and you put a veneer of respectability over it, even though you say, hey, maybe they've gone too far. Oh, is that it? They've gone too far?
You're incapable of showing a sense of empathy for Palestinians.
I'll let you speak. Do you believe what happened on October the 7th was justified? Yes or no?
I believe what happened on October 7th was a reaction to Israeli terrorism.
Was it justified?
Okay, the answer is no, it's not justified. All the attacks against civilians were wrong and war crimes, and they should be charged for that, but all the attacks against military targets were 100% legitimate, and Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. Do you disagree that Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? That's the answer. That's the answer.
I believe. I'm not going to sit here and play a game.
The thing that complicates it for a lot of people, and this is understandable, is a lot of people think, well, since Hamas also is like an Islamist group, there's an element of, well, I just don't want to be associated with that in any way, shape, or form, right? So even in a scenario where Palestinians have a right to defend themselves, and Hamas is that wing of the Palestinians defending themselves, there's an ick factor to a lot of people because they're like, yeah, but you're Islamists, and I'm against the Islamism. And I am too. I'm against the Islamism. But we live in the real world, and Palestinians have a right to defend themselves, and any nation has, or any peoples have a right to defend themselves. And sometimes that comes in a package that's not roses and peaches and cream and rainbows and puppies, right? And so that doesn't change the principle of it, you know? And by the way, people don't hesitate to talk about Israel's right to defend themselves when Israel is an ethno-state and a theocracy, and there's ultra-Orthodox extremists who are running rampant in the government, right? So there's a little bit of an imbalance there as well.
Was it justified?
You are trying to distract from
Why don't you just answer the question?
Genocide. You are trying to distract from an ongoing, because I'm not playing that game. Piers, I know that I stand on the right side of history by opposing a genocide, and you are an accomplice to it by sitting here and propagandizing.
Whatever, you can use you can use all that bullshit. You can bullshit
Israel.
That stuff as much as you like. But
wow, this is incredibly aggressive.
I will give you.
You just sit here and bully me, but you're just a bunch of genocidal.
I would love to know how he would respond to what my answer to that question was. Because my guess is he would really faceplant because he would object to the idea that Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. I think he would object to that. I think he would object to the idea that Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. And then that's debate over. That's game, set, match. Because once you admit that, you're saying I have a total double standard between Israel and Palestinians need to just shut up, take it, and accept it, and hope conditions get better, right? So anyway, there you have it. Off the rails debate on Piers Morgan. Rania did a good job. She was fighting off 3 different people who disagreed with her, and they're trying to put her in a corner and get her to say certain things and sort of steer the conversation in the direction they wanted to. She did a good job there. The massive amendment I would have made is, again, I think it's actually pretty easy to handle the question, like, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn October 7th? Yeah, but the parts where they attacked innocent civilians. The part where they went after the military, this is politically incorrect to say, but it's totally true. 100% legitimate. Under international law, from a practical perspective, you going after the military? You've been occupied for decades and decades and decades. You have no rights. There's no justice, no freedom. You don't have your own nation state, even though Israel was granted one by the UN, and the UN is trying to grant you one, and Israel and the US blocks it. You have a right to defend yourself. And if you go after the military, sorry, it's fair. It's fair game. They could whine and cry and bitch and moan about it as much as they want. They are wrong if they do that. So anyway, that's my answer. This was a good one. This was a spicy one. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.